Welcome to the Dance Reel podcast. I'm Kate Histon-Behrend. To be part of our community, subscribe or follow this channel. This episode was sponsored by Master Dancer Mindset. Know yourself, be yourself, and express yourself on and off the stage. Today I'll be speaking with Kaz Amos. Kaz is a psychologist and provides evidence-based mental health treatments. Her therapeutic toolkit includes acceptance and commitment therapy, cognitive behavioural therapy, neurofeedback, EMDR, and mindfulness practice. Kaz is also a dance mum of 16 years. Today we'll be focusing on mental health for dancers, how teachers and parents can best support aspiring dancers to actualise their dreams, and we also touch on the subject abuse in dance schools. A very educational episode. I hope you enjoy. Welcome, Kaz Amos. I feel so lucky to have you on my podcast today.
I actually feel lucky to be here. Thanks for having me, Kate.
I would love to just quickly, before we go into our conversation, have a little discussion about the fact that you just told me you're starting dance classes.
I know, I don't know whether to be mortified or excited or both. This is my second round. I don't even know if it was a ladies' dance class. I don't know if it has a modern or a jazz, or I don't know if it has a label, but it was fun. But this time around, it is adult ballet classes for me.
Oh, so beautiful.
And my posture rising just thinking about it, which is part of the reason to do it as well, other than fun.
And apparently good for the brain as we're getting older.
Ah, yes, this left-right brain coordination. Yeah, that's true,
Yeah.
actually. I hadn't thought about that. And I'm the head brain person.
Well, I feel very lucky to have you on today because there were a few things I wanted your expert advice on. And a lot of dance parents and teachers are watching this podcast. They have within their care aspiring professional dancers and wanting to provide them with some information on the latest research on how we can best support them. Something I'd like to know first is the timeline of the emotional and mental development from children aged from 7 to about 25. What's happening in the brain?
Well, in those early years, 7 to 10, play is the primary way that young people learn, children learn. It's through experimentation, trying something, seeing how it feels. Also, at even the age prior to 7, those younger children are really good at knowing how things feel, but probably not as good as expressing them. So trusting sometimes what their big feels might be saying is, I guess, an important part of what's happening for them in their brain. They're pushing to see if something moves and experimenting as well. And play is even more important at the younger ages. And I guess from a dance perspective, watching the little baby ballerinas all the way up to, say, the 7s, a lot of it is like, I can do these very small, basic moves. But like you said, I'm actually connecting both sides of my brain because I'm working on my left side and my right side, and I'm up and I'm down. And as I'm doing that, I'm developing those areas and the connection between those areas of my brain at the same time.
That's really interesting because I need to get my timeline right. But after I started my school, because I'm a Royal Academy of Dance teacher, the RAD changed their syllabus, incorporating for younger children to be play-based learning. So we went from quite strict, really articulating the foot at even 4, 5, whereas they ended up doing this big shift when play-based learning became a thing. So that was a really positive move from the RAD. So what about after 7? What's happening with the emotional and mental development from 7 and up?
So that's the time when kids are really starting to seek approval from the grown-ups around them. Do I look right? Am I doing this okay? And they're seeking that constant sense of validation from the adults around them, which in turn builds their image, their sense of self. And when we can encourage that and allow that to blossom in whatever way it presents, then we're assisting their self-esteem to bloom. Knowing that too, you might see those behaviours that kids might have that are really, they're desperately seeking that approval of the grown-ups around them. Yeah. And then some other kids around those ages, they don't care. They're just happy to be there. They're there with their friends. They're enjoying the social environment and they feel really safe and happy in themselves, secure. and they don't rely as much on that adult approval. Moving into those early teen years, say 11 to 14, that identity of who am I and what am I here for and who am I amongst my peers becomes probably the next serious developmental stage. For dancers, I'm thinking about our sensitivity to criticism in these years, like those early teen years. It only takes one little thing for someone to say to you, maybe not to everybody, but to some people, when you said that, you were just being mean. And that can then be internalized as, I'm mean, I'm a bad person. And very quickly, small criticisms from others can become big criticisms for self and impact how we see ourselves. And that then can go with us into our young adulthood. 15 to 18 years, we're starting to develop more independence. We're also still emotionally very vulnerable because we're not fully developed adults. There's a lot of need for peer validation in those later teen years as well. So looking to their friends to be part of the group. I always find this really tricky because you want to stand out, but you don't want to stand out too much. You want to be the same as
Yep.
everybody, but you don't want to be like everybody. So you're kind of trying to emotionally flex your independence, but at the same time, you still need your mum and dad to get you places. And that can be really hard in that 15 to 18 year period of development. From that 19 to 25s, we're looking at the brain coming fully online. So in young women, it's around that 22 to 24 mark, and for young men, it's around 25-ish plus. And by that I mean, so the lower structures of the brain are completely developed, the mid structures, which means that our thoughts and messaging in the brain go all the way to the front, to our prefrontal cortex, which is our thinking and decision making and executive function center. So that is not fully formed at all at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, all the way through until our early 20s, mid 20s. So
Yep.
there's a lot happening in that period of time.
So, in the dance industry, and I'm mainly focusing on students that want a career in dance and they may be doing competitions from a young age.
Mm.
Most of us have seen that movie Centre Stage, where that girl Maureen, the main character, has this pushy dance mum and she's just a micromanager. She's well
Yeah.
intentioned, but you can tell she's stressed. She's like invested probably a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of hours, a lot of hopes and dreams to see and to give back to her daughter so she can fulfill her dream. And we don't see in that story what happened in the younger years. We only see her probably, I think, maybe 16 years and over.
Mm.
What can go wrong in the dancer's relationship with their parent, with their support person, overstepping the mark? What does that look like?
Well, first of all, I guess overstepping the mark is understanding what the mark is for you, right? As an individual, what are my boundaries? If I have a good, strong sense of myself, then I'm probably aware of what my boundaries are and I can feel when somebody oversteps a mark.
What about for, say, a 7-year-old where they're very dependent on their parent and say they're going to an Eisteddfod and they're doing a performance, and then after the performance, what can we expect would be a positive, healthy feedback system from the parent to the child? If the child says, "How did I go?" and the parent may have seen, you didn't do this, what is the best way that a parent can actually approach that with their child?
I guess holding on to that criticism first, I am going to quote Gabor Mate. He's a trauma specialist in this world. He says, value compassion and connection over control
Yeah.
when it comes to parenting. And parenting across the board, regardless of what your child is doing. But in this instance, dance, valuing compassion and connection with your child over controlling will help you to maintain a really beautiful relationship with them while they achieve the goals that they want to achieve. So I guess that's the second part of that is, what do they want to achieve? What does a 7-year-old want for him or herself when it comes to their dance?
And usually at that age, it's just to dance, they're only 7, just to enjoy that experience of being on stage and to come off and it to be something that's positive. And I suppose if for whatever reason it wasn't, maybe they fell over on stage, they would need that soft place to fall in their parents' arms, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah, and maybe the correction is not for parents, but rather their dance teacher, who is the appropriate person to deliver feedback because that's their area of expertise.
And the dance judge, the one if they were doing a competition, I suppose. So, yeah, I
It's built into the system of a Stedfords, isn't it? That you can perform and get that feedback on the spot of what you did well and an area of improvement.
it is. It's just a very good reminder of the importance of that, that the child does need that parent to be that loving, unconditional space so that, in my experience, no matter whether you do well or not so well, they feel loved as a person. Correct me if I'm wrong, so that their self worth is not necessarily affected by the outcomes of their performance. It's
Mm.
not collapsed if, you get a highly critical or controlling parent.
Yeah, I'm not going to correct you because you're absolutely right. A parent's role at all times is to be present and to build that self-esteem for a child, teach a child to regulate their nervous system. So even if they do get feedback that feels critical, that the parent can then be the support while you unpack what it feels like as a kid. Ah, the feedback I got, I worked so hard and they're angry or ranting or raving or anxious. I can't believe they would say that about me. I'm a dance mum as well of 16 years, so I feel like I've heard a number of variations of this. But my job as a mum was always to listen and support her while she was going through those things, as opposed to telling her what she's doing right and wrong in her dance, because that is not I'm not her dance teacher. I'm her mum. And I get to be her mum, which is quite a privilege. And I can leave that role for somebody else. The same applies when you're a psychologist in a family. Nobody wants you psychologizing. They just want you to be their mum. Yeah.
When I had my dance school, most of our parents were wonderful, just very supportive, lovely people. But every now and then I would come across one that I would find needed probably more education and just a little bit of, oh, can I say self-awareness?
You
An
see that?
example,
Yeah.
an example I had was if their child didn't do as well as expected, say winning an award at our concert. It happened a couple of times. I'd get an email about how unhappy their child is, and it's so hard for them to, because their child's crying, and there wasn't necessarily any thought on the parents' part of, okay, so this is not my role, this is now your role to teach your child how to manage perceived rejection, or because that's what she would have been feeling. So instead, I might get an email about you shouldn't do trophies, or this is how my daughter feels and why didn't she get it, and it's quite loaded. So I often say to teachers, don't teach from your wounds, and what I mean by that is don't teach from your own sense of inadequacy and project it out onto the kids so they have to be good so you look good as a teacher. Like, let's all try and do this as aware as possible. But I would
Yeah.
feel the same with parenting. What could we say to parents out there that might feel that need to type that email, that might be blaming the teacher if their child isn't acknowledged the way they would have liked to have been acknowledged? There's this whole talk about generational trauma. And I feel like when kids are in these high impact environments, it really does need the parent to also become self aware so that they don't pass on their wounds to their child. And then it only iterates to the child that they are the victim or something by not getting a trophy or not
Yeah.
winning that prize, and pour them, which doesn't actually help them to just work out why, where they're going, get a little bit of an assessment, and then that responsibility to maybe work a little bit differently according to what the feedback is from the teacher. I don't know if you've got anything to comment on my long winded analogy.
Well, I think you're probably speaking to a parent who's upset, who's struggling to manage the discomfort of their child. Because a parent's role really is to hold lots and lots and lots of moments of discomfort for the children. And in that discomfort, provide self regulation, and that self awareness you're talking about, I think, is like before you send the email, well, what am I noticing about myself here? Well, I feel really angry. Am I feeling really angry because I feel like my kid's been shafted, or I feel like they've been set aside or left out? And am I relating to that because it happened to me? And if I am relating to it because it happened to me, then it's that phrase you use. I just love that, from teaching from your wounds, like parenting from your wounds too. That's my wound, and I really am responsible for caring for that so that I can care for you better. So I guess acknowledging that when a parent is angry or upset about something on behalf of their child, there may be something else happening in there for the parent, and acknowledging that it is so hard as a parent to be uncomfortable and not be able to solve all the problems of your every family's member's life. Because that's hard. It's hard to hold. It's hard to hold space for children who are maybe really determined and passionate, and they want these dreams even at young ages, which I'm sure you've seen throughout your teaching career. The most passionate 7-year-old who's willing to do all the hard work feel absolutely wrecked and disappointed. And then a parent who's reacting in accordance with that, because my child needs to be happy. Well, children need to learn to self-regulate along with the example set for them by their parents.
And being happy, I don't believe that's helpful, having that mentality that a parent's job is to make sure their child's happy all the time. How are they going to be resilient? Isn't it more about helping them, as you say, to self-regulate, to learn to work through the feelings of disappointment? What does that look like?
I'm just thinking, if my parent can't do that, then how am I going to learn to do that? That's maybe what that looks like. It looks like a parenting saying, wow, this must be so hard, darling. It's really, you know, what do you notice, bub? What's happening for you? Are you sad? Are you angry? Are you disappointed? And then providing that closeness, that connection, that compassion, which, a home is meant to be a place of all of those things. It isn't always, but in an ideal world, it is mostly that. Whereas being out in the world doing your thing, be it dance, work, teaching, running a dance school, you need a place away from that that's just yours, where you can be calmly, contently yourself. And dance schools there's a lot of expectation, there's a lot of hype, and that's part of the nature of why people love it so much. But to have a soft place to fall at home is equally as important when you're doing all of those extra things.
Looking back and reflecting, I can see how even for some parents, not getting so involved in the dance school in itself, it's nice for the child to have that this is my space, this is where I'm learning, this is my world. How, as a parent, do we know if we're sending our student to a safe dance school? Some schools, and I know in my experience, the first dance school I went to for 10 years was the ballet teacher was highly regarded as one of Australia's best ballet teachers and still beloved. And so I had, which still do sometimes have mixed feelings, but it was abusive. And what that looked like was the principal playing off students with other students, name calling, hitting, way back then, 80s and 90s. So I would go to ballet not knowing what to expect. Sometimes I would feel very frightened. And then other times I noticed within myself, and I can look back now, I felt a level of adoring. The teacher, she didn't wear ballet shoes. She taught in high heels. And by the time I had her, she was in her 60s. Yeah, she'd walk in like she's off a movie set, just so glamorous, jewelry, perfume. And it was like this facade.
Charismatic.
I never saw her wear track pants and ballet shoes, and so yeah,
As a consequence, no one else has permission to do that then, by the way. You know what I mean? You know that thing where you like, how you are sometimes gives people around you permission to be like that too?
yeah,
Yeah, you had no
yeah.
permission to rock up in your trackies one day and feel less than. No, you did not have that option.
And the constant threats. So I remember at one point, at just before I turned 14, and I got that independence to sort of stand up to myself. And I was preparing for one of my ROD ballet exams, and she was just off, and I felt like really rude, really, and you become a bit immune to it. But I think by then I was, starting to push back, and I just walked out of the class. I walked out, got onto there was the veranda called the veranda dressing room,
Mm.
and she said, all of a sudden I had taken back my power. And I'll never forget this because she said then, Kate, get back here now. And I just didn't. I stood there and I waited, and I wish I didn't wait. I wish I just kept walking, got my stuff and just went. And then all of a sudden she said, Kate, your exam, and her voice changed. Kate,
Wow.
your exam's so soon. You're doing so well. And she was sort of then, and I realized, I remember standing there going, oh, I've got the power now. But
Ah,
then she said, because I paused too long, then she said, you get back here now, or I will make sure no one in this town puts you through your ballet exam. And that was it, because I really it was like a month away, and I had to go under her name. And I went, so I just turned around and went back in.
wow.
And that's giving you a little picture of the culture.
Yeah.
And it was 10 years there. And so as an adult, Mum and I spoke a lot. And I said, Mum, why did you let me go there? Dad, why did you let me go there? And so we've had some really positive conversations as an adult after some incredibly tricky times of navigating out all these feelings and emotions that I had to work through with my therapist. But my mum also got sucked into the culture of that school because
Mm.
it presents as something so I'm going like savior, like I'm going to make your child special. And I could go into more and more, but I won't. So my question is though,
Mm.
how do we know what is, I'm going to use the word, and please correct me, toxic, I don't know,
Yeah,
culture of a dance school?
yeah, no, toxic is a
And I
good
also,
word.
I also want to put a little side note. This was 80s and 90s. So this was, not giving away my age, but this was a while ago. And I know times have changed. However, I'm noticing there's still some schools that some unhealthy stuff goes on, but it's almost done in a way that's looking more sophisticated and harder to spot.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because there's no longer, the wool is no longer being pulled over everybody's eyes because people are more aware of what abuse looks like and actually what it feels like.
So can we firstly define what would you call abuse? Would that situation,
Absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. So, playing off one student against another, which is an act of emotional manipulation between two people for your own gain, not for their
Mm.
gain, for your gain as the toxic person. Discouraging communication with parents. What happens here stays here. Your parents don't know about this. And, because this is private and this is what those sort of comments, that's not okay. It should be okay to talk to your parents about everything that you need to talk to them about. Humiliation, shaming, that interaction that you talked about then had a real push pull feel to it.
Mm.
Like, I'm going to push you out the door, but then I'm going to draw you back in, and then I'm going to push you out again. How does that feel emotionally? It feels exactly like that. That in when we talk about attachment in psychology with children, we talk about anxious and ambivalent attachments. That creates anxiety, which is that type of attachment is I love you so much. I hate you so much, but I love you so much. And it's so confusing for us as children and young people growing up in that because we never know what's right. And we become experts at reading the room and being highly vigilant, which is a constant state of fight and flight. And I'm imagining that fawn, which is another one of the F's, is exactly what you did when you walked back in the room. I'll just do what needs to be done in order to have the least amount of confrontation so that I can get to where I want to get to, but I'm going to have to endure
Yep.
more of this.
Yep.
Yeah. So parents looking for those things. It's all the same hallmarks of coercive control, gaslighting, prioritizing student performance over their well-being, and control instead of compassion. They're all very toxic things to learn under. I think one of the reasons they get used as tactics a lot is because that is the quickest way to train anybody with fear.
Yeah. And this ballet teacher I'm talking about, when I did my research, she was a terrible dancer, not
Oh,
accomplished at all.
really?
Yeah, it's
And
really
are you
interesting.
sort of saying that she pulled the wool over everybody's eyes?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So,
abusers often have what they call like confabulations or confabulatory behavior, which is that they believe their own stories about
mm,
themselves.
mm,
And part of toxic natured people, or even let's go a little step further into narcissistic traits, in some of those personalities, there's an element of grandiosity,
mm,
and they
yeah.
believe that. You know, the joke is that you'll never get a narcissist to therapy because they're always right and everyone else is wrong. And it's our problem that we're wrong. It's us.
Yeah.
You know? So to transport that into the ballet world or to the dance world, to have young people walking around saying, I'm the bad thing, I'm the problem. And if I only do better, if I only perform better, if I put more pressure on myself to rise to the expectations of this person, I'm doing it in a nervous system that is over aroused, which the flip side of over arousal is crashing and burning and
Mm.
having episodes of burnout. That's just not a healthy nervous system to live or to dance in. What do you see as a dance teacher when kids are dancing anxious? Do you
Mm.
get your best performance?
Mm.
Probably not.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I talk about not equating being on stage with receiving love. But when you are performing on stage, I'm going to sound a bit woo woo, heart. And so, for what I mean by that, just sitting in, you're performing in a high performance state, but it's relaxed and you're feeling really comfortable and at ease. And so, I try and get dancers to get into that state, mind state, before they go on stage and to think of themselves as an artist and of giving that what's in here, that sense of who they are as an individual to the audience. And that is the best gift because you can learn all your technical, everything there with your teacher in the studio and artistry, but no one can perform like you and no one can teach you what your soul is. And it's up to you as the individual to find and to feel that. And obviously with those healthy relationships with our caregivers to help us as little people to then to be able to express ourselves on stage.
When a dancer performs from that space, that's when you really see an exchange, and it's an offering and it's done from a loving place when you're doing it from here. If you're
Yeah.
doing it from an anxious place,
Mm,
you know, even when you were talking about it, your shoulders went up. So
mm,
you already know, like, oh, anxiety looks like this.
yeah.
If I'm dancing from this place,
Mm,
I'm going to be limited in how I move. I'm going to be
mm,
overthinking, and I'm not sitting in this lower part
mm,
of me, which maybe my new ballet teacher will teach me that this is where this trunk area
yeah.
holds is my area of support.
Yeah.
It's not up here because I can think about things, but it's not actually going to move me from here.
Yeah.
I'm probably stepping a little bit more into the somatics of where psychology and dance meet. But when you're dancing from your heart and you feel good and your gut signals to you, yeah, let's keep going. The performance, and I've sat through quite a few, um,
Yeah.
you can tell, you can see it in the dancers who absolutely feel like that their art, as you said, is the display, and that's what they're giving and offering.
Yeah, and the audience then feels it as well. And dance is the silent communication of the human body. It can just become that exchange, which is beautiful. And so,
Oh, I need to take notes for my dance class. That's so good. I love that you said that. Yeah.
yeah, no, I feel like that's where we as facilitators, as support people, as parents, as teachers, be mindful. For me, the new way of teaching dance can be you can actually you don't have to be a bully to be an effective dance teacher.
No.
That's let's make that done and dusted. So, why is it that parents and students are drawn to maybe the wrong kind of dance teacher that's charismatic but toxic?
Because they are attractive. They've got something, a product to sell, and they want you to buy it, and they're going to do a great job at selling you that thing. And you will know if you're seeing things in your own children or in your
Mm.
own dance school, if you've got teachers there who are bringing their narcissistic traits with them. You'll see that in the performance and in the behavior of the children.
And I've also noticed in my experience seeing children flock to their teacher a little bit too much. And I often think that's they're really like too much fawning around the teacher. And I've seen it at other schools, and I've looked and thought, that's well, I wonder if there's something going on there. I mean, could that be a sign? I don't want to generalize, of course.
You're bringing awareness to when something is too much and it falls outside the area of normal. And maybe it's not like a 000 call, but
Yeah.
maybe it's a couple of steps if closer to just outside the norm, which I guess that's your nervous system is all also recognizing, God, gee, it kind of feels like it may have started that way.
Yeah.
You recognize things that resonate with you. And that could be something that you're seeing because of your experience as well. And, when you've had an experience like that too, it's also hard to turn down your vigilance. But, when you've done your own work in working out what that's like, it's no longer triggering for you. So
No.
it doesn't,
No.
you don't have to worry about that. But if it's something that you've lived through and haven't yet addressed, then that's another reason it might be easy to fall into that as well, because you're familiar with that type of teacher. As if I'm guessing from a parent's perspective, you're familiar with that kind of teacher and you don't have any other expectation that it could be different because that's how it was for you, so that's how it should be.
And I feel like there's a lot of dance parents that may have danced when they were younger, and for whatever reason they didn't actualize their dreams, and at the same time they may have been used to the old ways of teaching, the archaic type methods, and so it's almost like if you're going to send your child to a dance school and they're going to be dancing competitively, then having a look at what your experience was like and expecting higher standard of teaching now, not necessarily as in, because there's this other thing in our industry where kids are doing far too much physically, far too young, and then the
Yeah.
injury prevention, like that's another concern layered on top of that. So I don't mean expecting a higher standard of my child should be able to do triple pirouettes at the age of 8. No, actually, no. Um, they will peak in their own time. I'm talking about the standard of communication and the emotional maturity of the teacher.
Yeah, that's a really important factor with what they bring to their students. And from a parent as well, sometimes be the grown up, go and join the adult dance class, fulfill your dreams.
Yeah,
And you don't have to live vicariously through your children because those things are available to you as well.
yeah,
And that was actually one of the reasons I started doing the ladies' dance group, was because my daughter was dancing and I wanted to be a part of it, but I didn't want to be in her space. But our dance classes were on at the same time, and she would pop in at the end of her dance class and take a peek at what we were doing. And
nice.
she was thrilled. She was
Yeah.
absolutely thrilled because I don't know, there was something which I wasn't fully aware of at the time, but it was like we both have our own space for doing something that we're really enjoying. And it's okay to be side by side. And we're parallel in our joy as opposed to me trying to steal her joy or control her joy or, demand more attention myself. I think that side by side is like, oh, well, can't beat them, join them. So
Yeah.
I might as well have a crack at something and see if I like it. Meanwhile, she watches a mum then who's not sitting on the sidelines going, oh, how come everybody else gets to have fun and I don't? Which is a part of my own story that I'm sharing. And then also the inspiration to just get up and do something different. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. Yeah, I had fun in the actual classes. The performance was terrible. I haven't watched it ever. Aside from all of that, though.
Yeah, but we're so critical on ourselves, right? I'm sure it's beautiful.
So you know what? What you just said, that speaks to exactly what we're talking about. We don't need critical parents. We don't need more criticism than we already are capable of delivering for ourselves. Especially when some of us are more vulnerable to it than others because of our home life, our experience, our past. So, if we already know that our children are capable of delivering their own criticism, do we also want to contribute to that as their guidance? And what wisdom can we take from that for ourselves so that we don't become another voice in their head? I guess as a psychologist in my day to day, people talk a lot about the voices in their head from their childhood,
Yeah.
which might have been a teacher, it might have been a parent or a grandparent. You don't want to be the voice in your own child's head in future, saying, oh, I wish you'd tried harder.
Yeah. Can I ask your professional opinion? And this is a tricky one. Instagram. About 8 years ago, I went on a podcast from Balanced Ballerinas and I kind of poo-pooed parent Instagram account for the child, the child dancer, and a parent monitored account, and the child might be about 12 and they're really good. They've got this Instagram account. And I was very anti it. And now I'm thinking, oh, was I too critical? And I can see the way the industry is changing and how the logic in some of those parents wanting to do that. But I always do get a little bit concerned with what's the future impact when that child turns 18. And you see, like Hollywood, childhood stars now becoming an adult and having to work through all of these issues. And I don't have the stats, but there's a good lot of them that have addiction issues. And because they're used to that attention, that feedback, and so they're equating their self-love through their performance, and that's what they're used to throughout their whole childhood. With that in mind, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, should we be doing Instagram accounts for young children where kids aren't even old enough to actually approve
Yeah, to
photos of
consent to
themselves
that.
being online?
Yeah. I wish I could say it was as clear as a black and white. I'm sure every parent will have their own perspective on it. I also know that the internet and social media is not as airtight as we would like to believe. So if I post a photo of my child, then there's nothing at all stopping any other human being, even if it's a private account, from screenshotting that and letting it go somewhere else. So that's a risk I'm going to weigh up for myself and my child in terms of, first of all, their consent to put that content online available to the universe. And then, like, is that what I want for my child? What does that exposure get them? And again, is it me who needs the validation, not my kid?
Yeah, there is definitely that goes through my mind. And then in defense for some of those parents, and they might get sponsorship. So their child is really good. They're getting their child exposed to sponsorship. So they might get some products to help pay for their dance lessons. And then the other thing, they get more exposure. You still actually have to properly audition for companies, but with this new, what can you call it, method, I think if they've got such a big following and if they're doing so well, that's just an added bonus to get in if they've got a big worldwide audience by 18 with a big Instagram account and then they're getting a job. Although I wonder if the job would pay well enough for tomorrow.
Like, even to come back full circle to where we started with brain development, is the brain of a 12-year-old capable of understanding the full gamut of what an Instagram account with lots and lots of followers means and offers? They can only understand it to the capacity of a 12-year-old, which is why we have adults that are parents who understand the full gamut of what is out there in terms of that kind of exposure. I guess a parent is weighing that up. Will this help to support my child's dance? It's a lot to weigh up. But also, the other thing I was going to say was that repeating the message that you are only a valid human if you are photographed perfectly and followed for that perfection just perpetuates the idea that I must be perfect. And how does that go for 12-year-olds? What does that grow into? That grows into, some of those things you mentioned, addiction, because there is always then that seeking of external validation, which neurologically is seeking dopamine, little hits of dopamine over and over and over again, which validates my existence as a human being. I'm so much more than my arms and legs. I'm so much more than a perfect picture. That's just one version of who I am capable of being. But I'm also capable of being kind. I'm capable of connecting beautifully with my people that love me, that I can love back. And those things take so much time and energy to maintain. I live with an influencer, and she will say that at one stage when she was getting it all up and running and doing incredibly well, she was spending 14 to 15 hours a day creating content, posting 4 or 5 times a day. Yes, getting sponsorship. Yes, the house is a constant place of delivery. But she has a very balanced view of what it means to her and
Yeah.
how that's an income source as somebody in her early 20s, as opposed to a 12-year-old who doesn't really care so much about income sources. There's so much to weigh up for a young person.
And it's funny, I see just around the culture of, I don't mean to be gender specific, but I'm going to say dance mums because it seems to be a female thing from what I've seen is following, it's like this following the leader, being part of the pack. Well, oh, that person's daughters, they've got an Instagram account. Well, I'm going to do it. And oh, they're doing that. And so it's like this little, and I look sometimes and I go, this is like high school.
And keeping up with who? For why? Because there's no magic prize at the end of Instagram. There's also, I mean, there's achievement and accomplishment, which you get to own when it's you who's done it. And then you get to thank your supporters around you who have helped facilitate your success because none of it comes alone.
So it
And yeah,
sounds like how can we do this authentically? And yeah, if parents are going to do Instagram account thing, just to really think it through and to think, am I doing this for me or for them? And maybe revisit the age. Is it necessary to do that so young? Can we wait till they're, I don't know, 16? Does having the amount of likes, the amount of followers, does that equate to self-worth as a dancer? Does that equate to that? If you as the parent feel like it does, then maybe have a look at that. Go visit
mm.
Kaz.
Come on in.
Oops.
Come on in.
Let's
You
have a
know,
chat.
but it is all that, but it's all of those things too that we bring our past with us. If that's still lingering, we
Yeah.
bring it with us. And as a parent, I guess our role is to also be aware of that and notice when it's popping up, and then doing something about it, doing something different about it, other than following what everybody else is doing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you are, I think, spot on. Like when you're coming back to that in dance and in life, that heart space, that who I really am. I'm so much more than I'm so much more than my body. I'm so much more even than my mind. I'm lots of things and wonderful, amazing, and I get to be here. And I'm fortunate to dance, and I'm fortunate to be surrounded by people who also love and share um, the art and craft of what dance means. Yeah, what a beautiful place to put yourself if that's what you absolutely love.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kaz. It's been such a wonderful interview, and you've given us so much to think about. And I love the way you approach psychology is also about having a conversation and pulling things apart so that we, as the listeners, can think for ourselves and self reflect. It's important.
Oh, I guess that's where we all begin to grow when we can reflect on ourselves and what brought us right here to the present moment.
Yeah. And if anyone's watching and if they're interested in working with you, how can they contact you?
So, I am a psychologist in Newcastle and I work for the Hummingbird Centre. I also present workshops and can facilitate sessions in workplaces as well. So, be that for your team or for your dancers, and bring some of these concepts that we've been talking about into real life and noticing how we can practice them in the everyday. Because that's really what, who we are as dancers, I'm sure, is who we are in our real life too. So that if we're authentic here, we can be authentic there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kaz.
Well, thank you for sharing the space with me. I really appreciate it.